It's ingredients, it's culture, it's locality, it's resources, and it's just this love of serving beautiful things like that to people. It was 2006, just decided to take this idea that I'd had for a long time, put on a dinner based entirely on ingredients that we sourced locally from farmers markets, picking up from farms, just doing dinners at farms, hotels, houses, anybody that would have us. We would just move in there, drop off our chairs and tables and tablecloths and all the stuff we'd cobbled together from thrift stores, like unloading an apartment every week. You have to understand how hard things are to move around that much and all the things that come along with that opening a restaurant seems to be the easiest solution. We're not reinventing anything, really. We're really just doing what we think is quality work. Quality product.
To be like, I'm paying such homage to where we source this, and I'm respecting the customer so much that all it needs is that piece of fish, beautiful lemon, a little bit of olive oil. And if I do anything more to it, it's actually almost like disrespectful to the quality of the fish and the dish itself.
Every single prep item is prepped there. It's meant to be not like a theater, but it's meant to provide transparency. We have nothing to hide about what's going on. We're proud of the entire process.
Jesse, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming.
We're excited to have you.
Great.
We were saying beforehand, Dai Due is at the top of our list of Austin restaurants, which is no small feat. So excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Well, you got the word meat in the title, so I think that we have a slight edge.
Yeah.
It was, like you said, it was a long time coming. Harry and I were doing some calculations before we were sitting at the kitchen table this morning because we're roommates as well. And we're like, how many times do you think we've been to Dai Due? And we've calculated probably somewhere between like 30 to 40 times between the two of us in the last 3 years. So we do thank you for creating just such a special place.
Oh, thank you. That's Hall of Fame numbers right there.
Hall of Fame numbers. Only to be beaten by our friend Matt Wagner, like we were telling you about, who orders the 2 quad burgers in the porterhouse every time he goes at the bar.
Yeah, I didn't know the name, but his legacy precedes him.
Yeah.
Definitely. He's talked about often in the kitchen.
Somewhat of an icon.
Yeah.
It's amazing, the food scene in Austin. Just, I feel like I don't know if you realize it, but I feel like Dai Due has just been the tip of the spear for this whole renaissance of this style of food that's coming to Austin. It's pretty incredible.
Well, thank you. It's very kind. We're not reinventing anything, really. It's very much, I like to say it's like the second oldest idea known to man. Like it's just taking food from around you and preparing it simply over burning wood. That doesn't, I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's like we're really just doing what we think is quality work with quality product.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun just doing some more research on you and the history around the restaurant. So you initially got started, was it around like 2005, 2006, more as like a pop-up concept? Is that correct, with like really high quality ingredients?
Exactly. At the time, I mean, it wasn't called a pop-up. We called it a supper club.
Supper club.
Started it with my business partner, Tamara. And it was 2006, just decided to take this idea that I'd had for a long time. Again, here I just took credit for this idea. I guess applying this idea to a local concept to Texas, which I'd been thinking about for a long time, and just doing dinners at farms, hotels, houses, anybody that would have us. We would just move in there, drop off our chairs and tables and tablecloths and all the stuff we'd cobbled together from thrift stores and put on a dinner based entirely on ingredients that we sourced locally from farmers markets, picking up from farms, maybe some wild caught stuff. I think the statute of limitations has expired, but I can probably start fessing up to some of the things we served back there in 2006. But sorry about that. But yeah, that's it, in a nutshell.
What was some of the initial feedback from people who were allowing you guys to come in and host these dinners?
Well, they were excited. I mean, it was this parallel road to this revitalization of the ideas around local food. I mean, it was happening in California, but I'm always like, big deal. Like California is like, you walk down the street and avocados are just falling on your head. It's different there. To apply that same sentiment to Texas. It's harder. You know, I've likened it before to, again, not to poke too much fun at California, but you know, the indigenous peoples that lived there were hunters, gatherers. There was agriculture, foraging, whereas the people that lived here were the Comanche, who would ride for days without eating or drinking, and then they'd finally just open a vein on their horse and drink a little blood to keep going. Definitely a different growing region. So getting it done here was different, and I was just, you know, always fascinated by that. People were very excited, still are, I think, as this was happening, and we started to see people more interested in ancillary topics like gardening, raising chickens, going to farmers markets, driving out to the country to pick up chickens from a farmer that they trusted. Grass-fed beef. I mean, you start to hear those words said for the first time in maybe a couple decades or a while. Or before, maybe beef was just assumed to be grass-fed. Things like that, where there was just there's this spotlight kind of heading that way, and we were lucky enough to kind of come up during that time where this interest was really generating, and it was a fun time. And the people that hosted, the people that attended, they really felt like they were a part of something, and it couldn't have been done without them foundationally, because there was a lot of people that would host: farmers, people that had big houses, hotels. You know, there's a couple of hotels in town that were just like, yeah, you can come and use this space. It was really cool. Wow. It was very community building as well.
Yeah, so it's almost like what you were doing with the supper clubs. You know, you're going the extra mile to source these ingredients. So that alone, for the people you're setting these experiences up for, is really like a labor of love. And it's funny because you hear all these incredibly well-esteemed Michelin-starred chefs, and it seems like almost like the better the chef is, it seems like they understand that Mother Nature is the true artist, and a lot of their best dishes seem to be really simple, and that seems to be your philosophy for the last 2 decades, right?
Definitely. I mean, look at an oyster, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really need much more. Or, I mean, or the argument can be made that it absolutely doesn't need anything else. But the oyster needs to be really good, you know, or, you know, there's this time of year. Same thing could be said for a strawberry. You know, it's so yeah, I think so. And then just the connection to that, and then just lack of, you know, you have to like pull back on the ego a lot with this type of food. You know, I was always really fascinated by a restaurant in California, Shaping East, who was like pioneered this. I don't mean to disrespect California and the cuisine and the input they've had at all. But, you know, Chez Panisse was this very formative influence on me, still is. And they would serve a dessert, and they would just serve a peach, like on a plate with a knife. And, you know, it's like the balls. I was like, wow. But then you're like, oh, I get it. I mean, they're not just slopping peaches onto plates.
Right.
You know, they're probably selecting 1 in 20 to have that, you know, that spotlight and be like, here's a peach. You know? I think that's cool.
So when did the supper club take that next evolution to something that could have like a bigger vision to it, as opposed to, you know, just going to people's houses, maybe now thinking about it as a more of a concept for a restaurant?
Yeah, it became a thing where it was just so exciting that there was just multiple avenues that could be taken, and we decided to take multiple avenues. So that grew into a farmer's market stand, where that gave us kind of a retail outlet, and also our first opportunity to cook for the public, you know, and also make like kind of simple, more, I mean, cheaper items than a supper club ticket, which at the time probably wasn't as much as it should have been, you know, in retrospect. Something like that these days would probably cost $300 or $400, and we were probably charging $65 for it. You know?
Yeah.
But the farmer's market gave us an opportunity to cook food at the source too, which was really special. And we're making, the first thing that we ever made at the farmer's market was biscuits and gravy. And so just really targeted as simple, very down home, approachable food that everybody's very familiar with, but just made with really good ingredients.
What a home run dish.
Yeah. I mean, again, but like how much credit we can't take, it's not our concept, but to take really good milk and really good flour and then protein, we eventually started making that with venison breakfast sausage. And so, a little bit more signature items and just kind of steering it in this one direction. But so the farmer's market gave us that avenue. It was really cool. And we're also selling pickles and brine chickens and sausages and charcuterie, anything. We were making anything, sauerkraut and kimchi, specials, whatever was in season, we're doing it. Artichokes would come into season with 2 weeks just saturated with artichokes. Strawberries, same thing. Peppers, same thing. We might get some cool fish in and we'd do something with that. And then shortly after that, we started the New School of Traditional Cookery, which was another avenue for us to go. And that's education, hunting, and more in tune with these butchery classes and that approach too. So we're at one point we're doing all three of those things, which is hard.
Yeah.
a lot of travel. It's like unloading an apartment every week, like moving, it's just a lot of that.
Yeah.
I was recently asked, it's like, why did you open a restaurant? And I said, you have to understand how hard things are to move around that much, deal with weather and all the things that come along with that opening a restaurant seems to be the easiest solution.
That's amazing. So that culinary school was really like a blend of all your passions, and you're a unique guy where you don't have a classic culinary background, right? It's all just kind of self-taught or just learned through experience. Is that right?
Yeah, I think learned through experience is more accurate. Self-taught would be disingenuous for me to say because I was taught by many great people and learned from a lot of great people, whether I was reading it or maybe I saw a video or maybe it was an in-person mentor. So yeah, it is absolutely. And some people, education appeals to them. It's very appealing to me. In fact, I've learned, as you get older, you figure out the things that you love to do. Like what's the best thing? And for me, it's education. I love that. Whatever form that's in, whether it's taking my daughter hunting, teaching a class, writing a book. Those are my favorite things to do. And because you can still learn while doing that, but imparting what you've learned is important because it's how I got to where I am, how we got to where we are.
Yeah.
Is because other people shared that. And I think it's super important.
I think one of the biggest gifts, to your point, is figuring out what you truly love to do at a young age. That way you can just chart your course down that path. How old were you when you really started to realize, hey, this unique blend of interests that I have, it's unique and I love it and I just want to dedicate my life to it?
I think it was pretty early on. It's hard to say. I feel like I fell into like the restaurant or hospitality industry because it was a good job, because it was a money-making vocation. I started waiting tables, I started bussing tables when I was 15.
Wow.
I had 3 jobs when I was in high school at the same time.
3 at the same time.
Weeknight, weekend night, and weekend morning. And I worked and worked and worked. I drove myself into the ground too. I had lots of cash.
Yeah. You're the rich friend, right?
Dangerous when you're a dumbass kid.
You're like the richest man alive at 15, right? Just with lots of cash.
Yeah. Cassette tapes were the thing. I was like, a cassette tape was around $10 and I just measured my wealth in cassettes, and it was just like, I've got enough to buy 7 of these things, it was my thing. It was music. And, I don't know. I forgot what the question was.
I think just like kind of how old were you when you started realizing like
right.
this is the path that I really want to go down? But you said, so you were waiting tables at a really young age.
Yeah. And I soon started, busting tables, waiting tables, bartending, managing. And then by the time I was about 19 or 20, I felt like the real, the most solid foundation in the hospitality industry is going to be in the back of the house. At the time, cash is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. When we opened the restaurant, we went on a no cash tip system. We distributed tips via paychecks, in a very, very, like a determined way to do that, because it pulls that end of the night cash equation out where everybody's going to go out and party.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do whatever you want, but we don't want to enable it in the least. And so I felt more security. It looked like a secure place. I didn't particularly grow up in an environment that valued fancy food or high quality ingredients. We ate well. I loved food. But we weren't particularly well off. And so it was a lot of TV dinners and fried catfish, fried chicken. I grew up on a lot of those staples. If we went out, it was to go get fried chicken. That was a treat. And so I did, something was appealing about the back of the house. And then I guess it was just comfortable for me to remain in an industry that I'd been in for forever. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to culinary school. I just kept working. I got out of high school, and then I was just like, I did travel. But I knew from an early age, I guess, that this was the industry that I want to be in. And I'm so happy because I absolutely love what I do. And it never is not an exciting day. I mean, it's like everything changes. If you're hunting and fishing and cooking and serving and classes and books and the culinary world, it just like people are always going to be hungry. And it's I'm very lucky that I was able to kind of steer myself in that direction at an early age.
Did you have any early travel experiences that shaped your culinary vision?
Absolutely. As a young adult, I went to, I'd been cooking already for a few years, and I traveled to Europe. I went to Italy. I went to Italy on January 1st, the year 2000. So I don't know if you recall, everything was supposed to be over. There was Y2K was supposed to drop every airliner.
So you were just like, I'm going to Italy.
Yeah. Well, I was in the air, when all the planes were supposed to just drop out of the sky. And I made it. And landed in Italy on January 1st, the year 2000. And that was kind of the formative trip. After that, there was a couple more trips to Europe, a lot of travel to Mexico. And that was really it, just like those places alone. And just with a hyper focus on the foods there and the wine that they're producing, and how and the why and the interaction it has with the culture and resources. Just like I couldn't get enough of it.
Is that where the name Dai Due is? That paying homage to that trip?
Yeah, it is. It's Italian. It means from the two, and I don't recall exactly when I saw that proverb written. It was in a book. It was in a book that referenced that proverb, and I was just like, that's really cool. I'm going to confuse the hell out of people one day with those two words. They're very hard to pronounce, and that was it. And it's also confusing because it's not an Italian restaurant.
Yeah, right. Where in Italy were you?
Originally, just in the Venice region. So that time I went to it was a continuing education class for people in hospitality. And it was a 2-week course that was just like intensive on Italian food. We would study different things every day. We would go visit, we'd go to a rice farm. We're, eating risotto with carp caught out of the rice paddies, stuff that I was just like had overloading on.
Yeah.
How beautiful that was. And then I had a few days at the end of the trip that I had open-ended, and the instructors were kind enough to be like, I'm like, yeah. They're like, what are you doing for the next 10 days? And I'm like, I got no plans. They're like, you want to go work? And I was like, I want to go work.
Yeah.
I do. And they're like, we're gonna send you up to this hotel in Venice. And they put me up in the hotel, which was opulent. Like I was just like, what is going on here? This place was amazing. But every day I would just go downstairs and cook with the chef. And I just worked in the kitchen. And it was the slow season. So it was really, it was kind of weird because there wasn't a lot of customers, but at the same time, he was just like, you want to make a rabbit tureen? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you want to go buy some fish? I'm like, sure. How do we do that? And he's like, we're going to get on a gondola and go to the fish market. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
We're going to get on a gondola with a gondolier and go buy fish. And it's just, these experiences that you're like, oh, this level of romantic notion does exist in the world, where something can be so just like a storybook that I'll never forget those moments. And we'd go and we'd buy these fish, take them back, and then a few people would trickle into the restaurant, and he would cook them however he wanted to. There wasn't a lot of choices, and it was and this was very, very formative. It was in January. Nothing's in season. This is far northern Italy, so it's quite cold. There's arugula and there's radicchio in that region. And so, well, why would you need anything else? They're not going to outsource anything.
Yeah.
They're just going to deal with it. Come May, things are going to be amazing. It's also citrus season. They got some olive oil. And I've told this story many times, but he served this dish one night, and he took a sole, a little flatfish from the Venetian lagoon, and he put it on a plancha, and he cooked it on both sides. He put it on a plate, and he had 3 sizes of arugula in his refrigerator, and he was very particular about which one would go with which dish. He picked the medium arugula out and put a little bit of that on the plate, a beautiful lemon, and that's another thing that we just never think about. Is like what, like these staples that a lemon.
Yeah.
No, I mean like a lemon, like you've never smelled anything like this lemon. A wedge of lemon on the plate, and then he took some olive oil and put it on top, and then he put it in the window for the waiter to come. And I was like, "What are you doing, man? Like, that's it, And I wasn't like combative, and I definitely did not say that to him, but there's these slow, wheels turning in my brain as I'm watching him do this thing. And I mentioned ego earlier. It's like, this man, it seemed like it required nothing of him to serve that food, but at the same time, it requires a lot to have the ability the grace to just say, these individual ingredients are so good. That's all that my job requires. Not out of laziness, but this is perfect. And send it out. Great arugula, an amazing lemon, beautiful olive oil from that region, and a fish that he didn't even season because he said it was salty from the lagoon. And at that point I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It's ingredients, it's culture, it's locality, it's resources. And it's this love of serving things, beautiful things like that to people.
Wow.
And I was like, that's really cool. I want to do that in Texas.
I'm imagining the tone of how you said that's it, because probably after you're asking that question, the way that your thoughts are formulating, it's changing everything you've ever known about food before. Like the quiet confidence of this chef to be like, I'm paying such homage to where we source this, and I'm respecting the customer so much that all it needs is that piece of fish, beautiful lemon, a little bit of olive oil. And if I do anything more to it, it's actually almost like disrespectful to the quality of the fish and the dish itself. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so when you come back to the US, are you just inspired to just say to yourself, how do I make this, whatever Dai Due was going to be, how do I make this happen as quickly as possible, or just start cooking with this new philosophy that I have that I picked up in Europe?
Yeah, there was still a few years before. I mean, there's a gap, and where I played around with growing food. I played around with, working on a couple farms. Continued to fish a lot, going to farmers markets, but which were very sparse at the time here in Austin. Boggy Creek, it's really hard to, tell this story without them. It's literally a block away from us.
Yeah.
And the importance that place had, because they were doing it better than anybody else, well before anybody else. There's a difference between just like growing organic vegetables and selling them, and being really good at growing organic vegetables and selling them, and which is what they are. Just craftspeople, like just masters of it. And when you go there and you see that produce, it's like, to me, it's inspiring. It's like, I can't wait to cook that, or not cook it. I can't wait to put that on a plate. It's vibrant, it's glowing. And they were very formative in instilling confidence that it could happen here, because, like I said, it's the farmers markets are few and far between. Getting a chicken in 2003 in Texas from a very reputable small grower was exceedingly hard, and with any consistency. That's one thing. You can get 12 of them, but they're not going to have another 12 for 4 months. So you're cobbling this together. So it's different now. But Boggy was kind of, a cornerstone in that, it can be done. And as the years progress, it's just gotten incrementally easier to source these things, because people are stepping up, the market's there, which is huge. It's financially feasible for farmers to raise chickens, things like that. So, yeah, there was a gap between the first time I had the idea and then some implementation, and just but not time wasted. Just kind of testing the waters, seeing what we could do here.
Thinking back to that gondola ride that you took to the fish market, one of the things that we talk about a lot on the show is just closing the gap for people when it comes to just understanding where their food has come from. And I feel like the way you were talking about that story, there was like a real intimacy with just the romanticizing of, we're going to this like market to go like on this boat to go find the fish that we're going to cook up for these patrons later on this evening. Do you actively think about that as a chef today? Like, I want this food to convey a message about like where this food is really coming from.
Absolutely. I think it's constant. If you walk down the sidewalk right now, or if I walk down the sidewalk right now, all I see is pecans. And so I bought a pecan sheller, and I'm like, we're just going to pick up all these pecans this year. All the pecans for this year are going to be pecans that we picked up and shelled. And to your point, every time we use those pecans, I want to think back on that. Like, we shelled these pecans because they fell off of this tree, which is a state tree, by the way. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's just, it is never, the fascination around it never ends for me. And it can be as subtle as going to pick some berries and making jam out of that, to shooting a 200-pound axis and like filling the freezer with this really, incredible meat after a really incredible hunt that involved a lot of adrenaline and sweat and this and that. There's definitely levels to it, but every little bit of it is still like really fun to me. And just that connection, whether it's a gondola ride or just going out in the backyard and grabbing a few sage leaves, it's still there, and it'll never go away.
And what do you think about kind of the other side of that coin, where we've grown so distant from our food? Like, does that stir anything up in you? Just kind of the simplicity and convenience of, you even said you kind of grew up on the TV box dinners. That's kind of like, the other side of what you've grown to revere from a food standpoint.
Yeah. I used to be, I think, more militant about it or more upset about it. And I realize in my mind, I think you get more done by working within things and giving people plausible solutions, and try not to make people feel bad about their decisions. But just try to educate and, just like, hey, if you can go buy a chicken from the farmer's market once a year, it's better than never.
Yeah.
Things like that. And well, what do we do with that chicken? And just like, do what you normally do with that chicken.
Yeah.
You don't have to get, just because, it's like, it's every day, and it's a acknowledgement of resources too, I think. And those little lessons, whether it be hunting or going to the farmer's market or just getting a really nice dozen eggs, where you might just take an extra second and be like, oh, that yolk is different color than I'm used to. Even something like those little incremental realizations, I think, are super helpful in acknowledging where not only food comes from, but where essentially any resource comes from.
Yeah. I think your broiler chicken story is great too, because even on the show and everything we do, or what you see on the internet, it's so wired to be like, oh, but if we could just keep pushing the health system forward, there's so much more work we need to be done. And there's truth to that. But like you're saying, you have such a cool perspective, because you're in 2003, 2004, you couldn't really get a great broiler chicken that was, corn and soy free, versus now you're saying it's a totally different landscape. Or even I would imagine maybe in the early days of Dai Due, there were some people that really knew about beef tallow, but I would think that why people were going was just the deliciousness of the food, where now there are so many people that we know that come to Austin, and they're almost seeking out Dai Due as like beef tallow number one, and the fact that it's delicious food number two. So like just that alone, we've come such a long way since you really started getting in the game and thinking more about this stuff. But it's tough to remember how far we've come too. So I really appreciate that point that you made before.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, you see these shifts in interest. When we first opened, we served grass-fed beef, and we had to like kill that program and go with the product that was a great compromise, and that it was a pastured beef that was allowed free choice access to grain. But then, maybe 2-3 years ago, we see this resurgence in not only interest in grass-fed beef conceptually, but actually an appreciation of the flavor as well. And so we've seen people becoming, if they want to, they become educated around what it means to have grass-finished beef and what that's going to taste like. And so we are seeing this shift in, like you said, they're coming for the tallow first. When we were at the farmer's market selling lard, people would come by and point at that word and snicker and be like, lard. Yeah. And I was just like, okay. Like, really? Like, okay, canola oil guy.
Yeah.
Really? Like, I don't see the problem with that, but it did things like that needed education, and we've gotten there, and it's really exciting to see things like that, where we can kind of conquer these misconceptions around certain things and people embraced them. I love this story, is we used to kind of take, I think important, the approaches that you take to maybe enlighten or educate or just at least present some ideas are really important. So, like the artwork that goes around Dai Due, like the design work is all very, it's not like cartoonish, but it's just like little renderings of animals and stuff. It's not like hardcore beef, like come in here, fire, horns, it's like, it's really like subtle and maybe quaint, and dare I say a little bit feminine, like, and that's all very purposeful, and it's just like, we're like, listen, there's fires, there's giant pieces of meat, and then there's like kind of this cute duck, like, and so along those lines, we used to do this, we would do a contest, and it was maybe the smartest thing I've ever done, was that I convinced people to buy jars of lard and then make a peach pie and then bring me that pie after they'd purchased the lard. Apologies for everybody that entered in the pie contest. Because now the curtain's been thrown apart.
The truth is being revealed.
Yes. Okay. So turns out I like pie a lot. And so we would do this pie contest, and it was during peach season. And so it's also trying to garner a little bit of excitement around peaches, which are people naturally get excited in Central Texas because we grow great peaches here. So we're going to harness that a little bit, but you have to use lard in your crust, and you have to make a peach pie, and then you have to bring us a pie, and then we'll announce a winner. And then the winner gets a case of lard. And it really worked. And we would just get all these submissions with pie. People would show up to the market because we'd have a day, like bring your pie this day, and so we'd sell a ton of lard. And then they would bring us the pie, and, we would judge, and, and to be clear, like the winning pie is always going to be straight up peach pie. Don't put anything else in there.
Simple.
Don't try to gild the lily here. Like, we're just looking for a great crust and peaches. And so the winner of the pie contest gets a case of lard, and it was a really good way to kind of like soften that approach, and be like, hey, lard makes the best pie crust. Crisco is modeled after lard, like the composition of it. It makes a great pie crust. We all love peaches. We all love pie. Make it as simply as possible. And then a little bit of capitalism thrown in there too. So
it's so genius, like incentivizing them to bake in lard. And were you getting stories of women or men that were like, so funny when I did this challenge, like my great grandma used to make like the best whatever, and she would use lard, and we just stopped. Were you getting that often?
Often.
Yeah.
I've told this story many times too. I was in the butcher shop one day, and this man walked by, and he had been eating in the dining room. He had taken his hat off in the dining room, and then he put his hat back on as he was leaving, and it was a cowboy hat, of course. I'm like, that's my great grandfather would remove people's hats in dining rooms in restaurants. He put his hat back on. He walked down, and he looked at me, and he's an older man. He's probably in his 80s. And I could tell that he kind of wanted to engage. I was busy with something. I looked up at him, and he said to me, I know what you're doing here. And he kind of smiled, and then he left. And I was just like floored. I was like, because I understand, not only did he know what I was doing here, I knew exactly what he was saying.
Wow.
And he was saying that. And I think that is to go along with pie contests and cute ducks. The best way to appeal to people, especially in our proud culture with a really rich history, a really generational, really familial history here in Texas, so bound by tradition. One of the best ways to present this old way of eating is to appeal to that, to say, this way, if you think this is wrong, but your great grandparents did precisely this. After World War II, we changed everything. We went with cans, and then microwaves came after that. And then, things got really off kilter. But really, like, probably the best way is to say, listen, this is how it just used to be done. This is a really cool cultural and traditional way. Therefore, what dishes do you want to make with that? And then the answer to that is biscuits and gravy.
Love it. What does that, did you have like a conscious thought of not using seed oils? Was that something that you were just like, you never even would have considered putting canola oil in any of your dishes?
No, we did for a long time.
Did you?
Well,
Okay.
to an extent. We're heavily reliant on butter, olive oil, and animal fats. When we opened the restaurant, we didn't have a fryer in the beginning, and then we had a fryer. And at that point, it was just a cost issue. We're like, how do we do this? So we went with GMO-free canola oil for a while, and I did not like it. I did not like looking at those boxes. And so much of the credit for that shift has to be given to Janie Ramirez, who's the executive chef at Dai Due and has been for 8+ years. She came on in year 1. She is a powerhouse of a cook. I mean, my favorite cook ever.
Wow.
She's an incredible human, incredible leader, and she really drove that initiative to get seed oil free, which I was like, once she said it, I was like, do it. Let's do it. Let's figure it out. Really, the only things that we had to conquer were what would we put in our fryer? Easy enough. Well, not easy. It's fraught with peril, actually. Like, I mean, finding enough beef fat. Yeah. And one person every week grinds and renders beef fat for a day. Like one every Monday.
Wow.
Somebody the restaurant, if you like the smell of beef fat, I would say stop by on Monday. We're closed, but poke your head in. There's a lot of beef fat getting rendered in there.
Wow.
And so we had to figure that out. And then the next step was mayonnaise. Janie is not only obsessed with mayonnaise, but she makes the best mayonnaise you'll ever have. If you're into mayonnaise, you would appreciate that. If you hate it, then whatever. So we had to figure out how to make stable emulsified sauces, in which point we were able to start bringing in the fermented sugarcane oil. That is a stable non-seed oil, and which we use in very small amounts. We fill the fryers with beef fat, olive oil, butter. All the cooking is done with one of those fats. And so we were able to go completely seed oil free. I think that was a couple years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago. I mean, before then we were 95% or whatever, but we are now. And it feels really good to do that. I mean, it seems like it's another just step towards this transparency that I really want to achieve. And that when you walk into the restaurant, you just know that everything is thoughtfully sourced. We thought about every single thing in there. I'll tell you another story. Our sugar. Janie did a lot of research, and she was like, like if we source sugar from this place, they literally like drive vehicles up on these piles of sugar. And she's like, I did all this research and I'm not into it. And then we found this one source of this unrefined organic cane sugar, for making desserts and so forth. Sugar, we use it. And so we found out how to get it, and it's kind of hard. And interestingly enough, the only place we could get it is Walmart, and they'll deliver it. And so, every once in a while, this truck shows up from Walmart and just drops all this sugar off at the restaurant. And it's interesting because, you think Walmart, maybe, forgive me, but maybe low quality or maybe not in keeping with our standards. But that was where we found it, and it's like, that's where we wound up. And I remember one time we were getting this delivery and this guy saw it and he walked by, he started taking pictures like he's doing an expose. And it kind of made me, a little upset, because I'm like, what you think you see is actually the complete opposite of what you see. Like, you're not busting us. You're actually just exposing the level that Janie has gone through to make sure that every ingredient that's on your plate is really good.
Yes.
And it just happens to come from Walmart, man. Like, that was not done lightly.
Right.
It's like, I was like, go ahead and post it and like call me out. Please let me tell this story if you want. Nothing ever came of that, but I remember thinking, like, it's a very nuanced world out there, and trying to find the best ingredients. You never know. And if you start poking around, you might find out some very disturbing things about where your food comes from.
Oh my gosh. I would never even think about just the sugar quality, and that intuitively makes so much sense. And I think we need as a country restaurants like you guys that really don't compromise on anything, where the quality of food is so good, it's so well sourced, it's really like a labor of love, and then the food is just absolutely delicious too. Like that, is it the Chipotle mayo that you guys serve with the fries? We always get the extra Chipotle mayo because it's so good. You don't even realize that mayo should or can taste that good.
Right. We're we're buying peppers in season and smoking them and drying them too, so there's so many layers to that, so we're not buying Chipotles. We make our own. We buy red jalapenos and smoke them and dehydrate them. And we make our own paprika, which is one of somebody asked me recently, it's like, what is your favorite thing? And I was like, oh, it's paprika. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, we buy several 100 pounds of thick-walled Hungarian peppers. We smoke them over post oak and then dehydrate them. And then as needed, we grind them to a powder. And, with, apologies to Spain and Hungary, some of the best paprika in the world. I think it's just, it's magical. It smells chocolatey and smoky, and it's really cool. And it's this ingredient that maybe has been lurking around in the back of your cabinet. It's just this cakey, red, stale, flavorless mass. And it's like, or it could be this. But it's just another one of those things that as an employee, when you sprinkle paprika on something and you've seen the team, in August and September laboring to make that stuff, you don't just toss it on there. You understand that that's a dehydrated pepper that came from that nice lady, who carried every one of those cases in herself, and that whole process. And then the guy who dropped the firewood off, that's the only other ingredient that went in there. It's like just this respect for all these little nuanced ingredients. I think it's just really, really cool that, you can dive as deep as you want into this stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, the way you're describing the level of detail that you guys are going into to source and create all the ingredients, raw materials, makes me think that probably reframes how you guys think about food waste. And just when it comes to food that needs to get thrown away, it's probably hurts that much more because you guys are going through and making sure stuff's coming from the right places.
Yeah. Janie says all the time, in the kitchen, she says, everything is expensive. And it's true, because it's like we're not using everything we use is it's expensive for a reason. Not that it's a luxury ingredient, but because it's coming from people that need to feed their kids and keep their farms open and stuff like that. So they're paid an equitable rate. And so waste hurts, and we go to great lengths not to waste anything, whether it's compost or whether we're feeding bread scraps to chickens that we'll then get eggs from, we'll try to utilize everything out of necessity, and there's no escaping the financial aspect of this, this is not a 501c3, we want to pay our employees as well as we can. We want to provide them insurance. We want to throw them a party every once in a while. We want to buy them pizza on a busy day. We want people to stay there for 10 years, which they have.
Wow.
We want our farmers to be equitably treated. So it's a really hard wire to walk, when it comes to the financials of it too, because you have to you don't want to be seen as a super fancy restaurant. You want to be sustainable financially, just like you want your farmers to be sustainable financially. So yeah, these products cost more, and that forces a utilization. That's one driving factor to force utilization and not wasting anything, along with that incumbent standard of these things everything is precious. So waste stings, but over time you figure out better ways and develop better systems to deal with it.
I think when you go into the restaurant, your eyes just so naturally gravitate towards just the overfire cooking setup that you guys have. Was that when Dai Due was, when you're going from the supper club concept to brick and mortar restaurant, did you know from day one, we need to find a way to just build this over the fire cooking setup indoors? Because I don't think I've ever seen that in another restaurant before.
Sure. There's places that are doing it now. I'm not saying, again, not to imply, over the fire cooking, we invented it.
Invented by
But
Jesse Griffiths.
in a restaurant, I've seen Fire Door on Netflix.
Sure.
That
Oh,
guy.
yeah. I mean, beautiful places like that. Yes, we always cooked over fire at the dinners, or when possible. Sometimes we'd be in a hotel kitchen and we just had to deal with it. We'd change the menu. But fire being a huge part of it. Fire also being a huge part of our cultural approach to food. We are in what has historically been a big forest, a big oak forest, a big oak and pecan forest. And then when you go south, we're in a big mesquite forest. So, there is that aspect too. I think it is appropriate to cook over fire here. That's how barbecue happened. It's like, it's really cool. And why barbecue doesn't necessarily exist in Ontario, I mean, where like that style of cooking or preservation is as necessary as it is here. In designing the restaurant, we wanted to tell a really short story when you walked in the door, and that you come in, the first thing you see is a counter. There's currently a bunch of beef rib rolls in there aging. Beyond that is a table where people are making food, prepping food. And there's a rail, the butcher rail. Mm-hmm. The people at the table are prepping bread and desserts. They're making sauces. They're also cutting up a pig. It's all happening at that table. And so that everybody knows, there's no area in the back of the restaurant where that happens. Every single prep item is prepped there. It's meant to be not like a theater, but it's meant to provide transparency. Like, we have nothing to hide about what's going on, and or not hide. We're proud of the entire process. You might walk in there and maybe somebody's put off by someone taking a cleaver to a side of pork, but that's how the pork chops happen, And so it's in all these processes. Beyond that is a fire. So far you've come in, you've seen a cut of meat, people cutting meat, and a fire. And my concept pitch is done. It's like,
this is like heaven for the Meat Mafia podcast.
Right. I don't have any more explaining to do. You've already figured it out. Like the old man said, I know what you're doing here. Yeah. And that's it. And then there's crocks full of, in season, they're in potatoes. There's tomatoes laid out on sheet trays because we don't refrigerate our tomatoes. They come in, and the only place that we have in the whole restaurant is just right there. We're not showing them off. We just don't have another place to put them.
Yeah.
And other fruit might be ripening. There's definitely something fermenting, on purpose, somewhere in there in a crock, or more likely in a 50-gallon bin. There's some huge batch of sauerkraut or kimchi going. There's jars of dried peppers. There's a little bit of retail space. And then there's a place to sit down and have all that. And then there's a bar, and then there's the wine, and there's the beer, and done. And then beyond that, in the back of the restaurant is a walk-in that will never be big enough, and an office that will certainly never be big enough, and a dish pit. It's actually kind of roomy.
The way you're describing, I'm like, I can't imagine where this actually is in the restaurant.
Yeah, it's and that's it. I've described the entirety of it. There's an ice machine back there, but the only thing that you don't see is the dish pit, the boring stuff that happens on the computer, and the big place where we keep the stuff cold. That's it.
What's changed in your philosophy around food since you started Dai Due until today?
Well, that's a great question. I think that I've mellowed. You're young, maybe a little too idealistic or opinionated. I feel like things are better when you're open and not judgmental. I used to be very hardcore, like, I'm not going to eat any meat unless it is like this. But I think more than that, I really appreciate, like, I've been so fortunate to witness these other entities grow in like a business way, you know, like farms that have gone from small farms to medium-sized farms. You know, farm to table, who has really enabled the serving of locally produced foods because they made it very convenient, and that is key.
Yeah.
That wholesale, that distribution model. You can get milk and apples and all kinds of vegetables and some meats and all this stuff from them delivered tomorrow morning. That's been really cool to see that happen. And things like an appreciation for HEB, you know, like a great company. Now, do they serve a bunch of non-locals or sell a bunch of of course, yes. I mean, but you know what they also quietly do is sell a ton of really good local produce. Like, I mean, from larger producers, but it's affecting the landscape in a really beneficial way, I think. You know, it's still promoting farming. A lot of organics. Like just today at Central Market, I bought okra, red onions, cucumbers, and mushrooms, all locally grown from Central Market, you know, HEB. Pretty cool. And that was not even everything that they had available, you know. So an appreciation for these huge models that are incorporating those kind of things in there and really helping that whole food system quite a bit, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I'd say that I just like an appreciation of wherever we can make strides is beneficial.
Yeah, it's like we can't just immediately
No.
flip the model on its head. You got to solve for feeding people at scale versus these constant improvements like you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that HEB story is great because I guarantee you there's probably a ton of people locally around the country that just assume that every piece of food you're putting into your mouth is something you've hunted or something from a farmer's market. I think that's really encouraging that, you know, go to Central Market and get some great food and vegetables and meat.
Yeah. Well, I've got a kid too. So, I mean, you know, bananas, you know,
Yes.
you know, and I mean, we really try. I mean, the protein, I've got that wrapped up. You know, I've got a lot of deer and hog and fish in the freezer. But the other stuff, I mean, sure, it's cool. Don't feel, guilt or anything, but just make those strides, you know. I think that I've definitely just mellowed on this like local militancy. No, the restaurant still there, you know, we're still doing it. I mean, it's like, it's our thing, you know, it's our concept now. And people, after 10 years, people realize, hopefully. We still have people walk in and be like, I'll take a Jack and Coke. And we're like, we don't have either one of those things, you know, like, you know, or, you know, we don't have salmon, you know, like, you know, there's still conversations around it, but, you know, we've had a lot of time to talk about it.
Yeah. One thing unrelated I wanted to bring up is I think what's one of the most admirable things about you as I'm getting to know you better is you just seem really humble and genuine. And I'm just curious, like, has that humbleness just always been part of you as a person? Is it something you learned from your parents or life experience? But
it's an ironic question.
I'm just curious.
Well, let me tell you. That's very, very kind of
this
you
is
to
how
say
humble
that.
I am.
Yeah, very kind. My parents are very humble people, hardworking, incredibly humble people. I don't ever think I know best about anything, and that is, in my mind, highly advantageous. I love learning, and I might not love being wrong in the moment, but eventually I'm like, that's cool, learning better. You know, I'd rather. So, I mean, there's certain things that I feel very confident about. There's certain ideals that I will stick to that I think are probably better, you know, like a model of, you know, sourcing food. You know, I do think that it's proven. I think it's better for everybody. And I can speak with some confidence on that, but I still think that, and it's kind of in the vein of food in general, every day is a new day. You're going to wake up hungry after you've eaten the best meal of your life. And I think you can apply that to your knowledge. Like, as smart as you think you are, you still can learn something the next day. And
Absolutely.
and from anybody, and that's one thing that I get to surround myself by all kinds of people. I'm in Austin, so I'm in Texas. I'm around every different type of community you could hope to be around. And I, for one, love that. I love all different kinds of people. And you might think that this person will hold this belief system, and you might be proven wrong, or you might hear why they hold that belief system, and you might be like, that's cool because that person was really nice and it changed my perspective on the whole thing. So maybe I'm selfishly humble because I like to know more things.
Yeah.
Are there any other local chefs in Austin that inspire you and that you're constantly drawing inspiration from?
Definitely. Todd Duplashan, he's always been such a natural, and just his food's so intelligent, and he's so just crazy smart. Fermin Nunez, definitely I had a rare night off maybe 3 weeks ago where nobody in the house was around. And on top of it, I didn't have anything to do, which is just never happens.
Never happens.
Like that alignment. And so I was like, I am going to go to dinner and I'm going to eat exactly what I want. And I'm going to go by myself and I'm going to leave my phone in the car. I'm going to stare straight forward, hopefully not make the bartender real uncomfortable. But I'm just like, I'm going to go and eat. And all I want to do is sit there and think about that food, and I'm going to eat whatever I want. So I chose Este, and it was an easy choice for me. Actually, let me back that up. Not an easy choice because I might have chosen his other restaurant, Suerte. I don't know what it is stylistically, but his food is just very, very appealing to me. Like, I love his food. I love his cooking. Very simple, very refined, excellent service, incredible desserts. Fermin's great. Michael Fotage, he's great. I mean, I all over town. I would fear more leaving somebody out.
Right.
Right now, there's incredible talent here, and I'm very appreciative to be in a town that we're held to very high standards. And it's great. There's just very, very thoughtful chefs in this town, and it's great. And we're lucky. We kind of sit back in the corner and throw salt on meat, whereas other people, I'm like, how did you think of that? But that's their lane, and I'm so appreciative that there are so many lanes, and that we're in the slow lane, and I mean that in the best way.
And it's inspiring how you're all probably pushing and learning from each other. Just like you're saying, oh, how did this chef do this? That same chef is probably like, wait, so with their Chipotle mayo, they can trace back not just the pepper, but the wood that they smoked the pepper on or whatever, right? Like you guys all have your own superpowers. And I love the some of the best meals I've ever had are with groups of people, of course. But I also love the concept of just leaving the phone in the car. I'm not going to get this unnatural dopamine hit. I'm going to sit at the bar or sit at the table by myself and just appreciate this incredible meal.
Yeah, it was good. It was so good.
What'd you get?
I had it mapped out. I was like, they brought the menu, and I was like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Oysters, 3 oysters, randomly. Just like, bring me 3 oysters. 3 oysters, 1 fish taco, because this fish taco is, perfection. He sent out a tostada. Didn't mess up my form or anything. It was perfect.
You welcomed it.
I welcomed it. Yeah. And then I got a steak. I got a steak at a seafood restaurant. I know, but it was. I love the steak there. And then I had chocolate ice cream.
Dang.
Yeah,
That sounds
perfect.
That's a home run meal. That's a home run meal.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah.
How has your hunting experience influenced Dai Due, or just how you think about food? Because I feel like it is a massive part of your story, and we haven't really touched on it too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's drastic. I came to hunting later in life. Like many people these days, I grew up fishing. My dad and I fished all the time, and it was a huge part of what I did and being outdoors. And I think that hunting was just a door that I'd never unlocked. I always wanted to be outside, and fishing slows down if you don't have a boat, kind of in the winter. You know, it gets kind of a little slow, and I was always just like, oh, I wish I could be outside. And then one day I was like, oh, I can be outside. Turns out, if you just, learn a million things, and, surmount a bunch of barriers to entry, then you too can be hunting all winter and manage to kind of put that together. And yeah, it's changed everything. I mean, we're known as a game restaurant by design. We serve a lot of feral hog. We serve a lot of nilgai. We serve whatever deer we have access to. Exotics. Maybe red deer or axis or fallow or sika. We serve aoudad, which is a wild sheep. I'm very proud of that because people say it's inedible. Which is, if you want me to serve something, just tell me it's inedible. Wow. So yeah, it's guided the concept of the restaurant a lot, mostly because I view Central Texas as being a place where hunting is part of the culinary conversation, whereas a restaurant in New York City, it would feel a little weird, Not to say that in New York and the environs around New York City, but Central Texas is home to a lot of game. Also, the rocky areas of the hill country and the cross timbers are not really great for growing anything besides goats. And so game enters into the equation very naturally, I think, as does fish out of the Gulf. And so that's really why. It's not done for any exotic reason. It's definitely not a gimmick where you can see game on menus sometimes where you feel like it's just kind of gimmicky, or it's like, ooh, that's very exotic. How you're serving, it could be weird, like yak or something. And it's like, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
But, and I can tell you why we're serving feral hog and nilgai and aoudad, and they're invasives and they're delicious. So yeah, hunting has informed it extensively, and I've made a living off of incorporating hunting into food, through books, which is really fun, or hunting schools, which is really fun, like all these very rewarding experiences, and kind of this narrative that we've been able to take and incorporate that into like a standard restaurant or a stance on food, and incorporate game into that. And I always try to push back a little bit when it's like, oh, it's all about hunting and game. And it's like, listen, like I was saying earlier, I love picking berries. I love all of it. Hunting takes up a lot of time, and currently I'm fairly obsessed with turkey hunting, just for a bunch of reasons. But it's part of it. And, it's just like getting good eggs. It's just like getting a good radish or a pepper or some really cool salt from the Laguna Madre, or some milk or a great cheese or a perfect peach. Is that peach from the Fredericksburg area? Is it from Lake Buchanan, where they might be a little bit better? Hunting to me is just another aspect of it, but it's attractive as a topic.
How do mere casuals like me and Harry actually make our Thanksgiving turkey taste good? Because it's such a bastardized bird,
right?
But I feel like if we know how to do it the right way, it could actually be delicious.
Yeah, so that's That's tricky. Turkey right now, the topic of turkey and Thanksgiving, like wild birds, domestic birds, is a very nuanced conversation. I think turkey, be it domestic or wild, is just fantastic. I think I love the flavor of turkey. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful bird, and they're big. That's cool. It's the biggest bird out there, that you can eat. I mean, besides an emu. Buy great turkey, and just it's like anything. It has to be cooked well. I always tell people to cook sausages like steaks. You don't just have to forget about something or just treat it like, oh, it's just a blank. You have to cook a sausage with the precision that you'd cook a steak. And a turkey's the same way. You have to cook these things with precision. It doesn't mean that you have to fret or worry or just sit there and stare at the thing, but just do some research and try to achieve that goal, but make it fun, enjoy cooking. I can't really do the 10 tips to make your holiday bird better.
But it's possible to make
Absolutely.
it, because
brine.
Is it La Barbecue that has the really juicy turkey?
La has very good turkey.
So I've not had it, but I love turkey at a barbecue place. So
it's just so juicy. It just defies everything you think about the bird. We all just think that it's just this dry bird.
Yeah.
That you have to soak in gravy or whatever.
Just like I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the turkey's fault. It's definitely not. That it requires just some nuance. And it's like, a chicken breast is easy to cook because it's small, but a turkey breast is hard to cook because it's big. It's like there's going to be gradients of heat affecting it and things like that. But, do your research and figure out what it is that's going to make that turkey better. It's like I just put out a book about turkey, wild turkey, and wild turkey hunting. And so this question around Thanksgiving comes up a lot. And I keep saying, it's like that book is kind of written about the other 364 days of the year, where turkey is regarded as a daily food source, like a Tuesday night thing. And it's also very specifically about the wild bird, the conservation efforts that have gone into saving that bird, the hunting of that bird, the enjoyment of that wild animal. And it's very complex relationship with this collective psyche where we think that you eat turkey one day a year or in a sandwich. It's like, barbecue has actually kind of bridged that gap a little bit.
Yeah.
But we do have sometimes the strangest food, I would say maybe a moray or maybe a tradition or rule. Consider very simply, we eat embryonic chickens until noon, and then we eat chickens after that, but will not eat them embryonic chickens after noon. If you rephrase things like that, it's like, it sounds just downright silly.
Yeah.
Would you like chicken for breakfast? You're like, are you crazy?
No.
Is that even legal?
Yeah.
Or scrambled eggs for dinner. I mean, people might do that, but it's like, ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or what? Are you feeling lazy? It's
Totally.
very, very interesting that we have all these rules. That was a way more answer than you asked.
It was
for.
a great answer. It even reminds me of the mental aversion of you love sushi, but you're weirded out by beef tartare, antelope tartare, or something like that. When it's like you're already eating raw foods. It's just interesting, our conditioning around some of these things, to your point.
Definitely.
When you were over in Italy, did you ever imagine that you were going to be writing a book on hogs and turkey and weaving these narratives together?
No idea. Especially, I mean, if you could go back to, when I was, working in Denton and be like, yeah, you're going to write a book about hunting wild turkeys. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I mean, although in the book I do mention that probably my earliest hunting desire was when I realized this, like, I want to do this thing. I was a kid And my grandparents lived in Central Texas. We lived in North Texas, and we would travel down to see them. I don't remember where we were, but we pulled over on the side of the road. I remember looking down into this canyon and seeing all these turkeys. And my first thought was, I want to kill one of those things. And I was probably like 8 at the time, and it was interesting. And I discussed that in the book. I knew, that was there, I didn't know how to go about it or anything. All I knew was like, I know people do that. I want to do that. I want to chase those things that are down in that canyon. I could see them. We were like a roads, you call it a rest stop. And we're just looking at those birds. So, but yeah, the path has been interesting. I wouldn't trade it for anything though.
How has Stephen Ranella influenced you?
He's been an incredible supporter. He keeps me on my toes, and I get I'll get a phone call, be like, oh, and it's always a cooking question,
really?
Which is very flattering.
Yeah.
But it's always the most random cooking questions. And I see it. It's like, oh, what's this going to be? And they're like, no way, really? Okay, let's do this. Let's walk through it. Been great. Steve, in my mind, is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met.
Really?
He goes to bed and reads every night, and that it's going to be some very specific, probably historical or natural book. Incredibly well read, knowledgeable, just a fascinating human. And I think it's really, it needs to be said that it's very real what you see around that production. He is an excellent hunter. He is an excellent outdoorsman, an excellent shot. When they film things, they don't do second takes. It's really cool. And I think that integrity and that being that genuine has been inspiring. And that level of success around it. It says, like, he is doing Steve things and people listen, and it's just really cool to see that it can achieve that level with that much integrity.
So he's just hitting you up with random cooking questions?
Not often, but random enough where it's like, oh, kind of like wasn't expecting him to call me.
Keeps you on your toes a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
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 What do you think is what's the best compliment you could get from a customer that comes to Dai Due and has a dining experience there?
Besides, I know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I do now. Bring your kid in, just the two of you. There's nothing that I love more than seeing like a little kid and a parent eating together. It's like, for whatever reason, dad had to go do something, mom had to go do something, whatever. And it's just the two of them enjoying a meal there, which would insinuate a certain, I don't know, they had to buy in. Both of them would have to buy in. So it's not going to be a spoken compliment. I think it would be that, like, when I see like that situation, I love that more than anything, because it's going to be an indelible memory for both, probably. Just that one-on-one time over a meal. Maybe it's considered fancy, or, like, oh, this was interesting, or maybe it's the first time I ever ate this. That would be, that is, and because it happens, I would say that is the biggest compliment that I could get, is just like a one-on-one sharing that with your kid.
Wow. Like just being able to play a part in that memory that they're creating at your restaurant.
Yeah.
And like you having a menu where if the child wants, fried chicken or fried quail or something, they can get that. And if the parent wants something a little bit more leveled up, they can get that too. But both are equally delicious.
Yeah. Or maybe they step out a little bit and they get something that they might not normally get.
Yes.
Chicken hearts.
Yeah. My daughter's favorite.
So good.
And
She loves chicken hearts.
It's one of those things where you just immediately sit down and have to order it. I feel like I've had it every single time I go to Dai Due. Are there any concepts that you have floating around in your head that you're like, I need to do this at some point?
Well, I guess I'm talking to investors now. Like, all right, so anybody out there with like $1 million? Oh, what am I saying? $8 million. Restaurant life is hard. I mean, being honest, it's really hard. If somebody was to come to me and be like, all you got to do is create a menu, man. And I'll be like, yeah, that sounds fun. I don't have to worry about staffing and like the dishwasher breaking. I'll be like, I'm all in. There's two, like, I guess how we can call them concepts, that I find really intriguing. One being seafood. I love seafood a lot, and I love really simple seafood restaurants. Quality seafood to me is almost a perfect restaurant, especially in the winter when oysters are good, because we go in there and we'll get oysters, peel and eat shrimp, maybe an order of fries. You know, you haven't lived until you've eaten French fries and raw oysters together. Trust me. And maybe some sparkling wine, like a little cava or something in it. Oh my God, so good. Quality seafood might be a perfect restaurant, but something like that where it was just like, this is what we got. We got a fryer, we got a grill. That's it. We got a fryer and a grill, or we won't cook it. Like those are your choices. You know, a couple vegetables, maybe like one dessert or something. And then I don't know. I've always thought that would be really fun. You have crawfish in the spring. You'd have blue crabs. You'd have shrimp. Just like a big place that just had like cranking out family style platters of just Gulf seafood. Be really fun. Oysters and shrimp and squid when you got it, and grouper and snapper and whatever it is that was looking good. Be really fun. The other would be I'm obsessed with German food.
Really?
You weren't expecting that one.
No, curveball.
No,
Let's go.
I love German food. I think there might be something genetic about it. My grandparents and my father, they lived in Germany after World War II. My grandfather was stationed there. Actually, he was stationed there before the war was ended as well. And they grew to love everything German. They always drove Volkswagens. And then when I was visiting them, they lived in New Braunfels, so German community.
They really just
they just couldn't let it go. And they love German food, and they kind of introduced me to that like Texas German style food, and I've always really liked it. And I think it's a really cool cultural deal here, because if you go out to Fredericksburg, New Braunfels, there's German enclaves out there, and there's a real old history of that influence. And I think it's really cool. It translates really well. Lots of game, smoked meats, lots of pork, preserved vegetables. We could execute German here on a local level. What's interesting too is like we can almost execute Vietnamese food here on a local level too, which is pretty cool. It speaks to the diversity of our climate and our region. And also that we've had such an influx of people more recently from Vietnam have come here and really added so much to like the culinary composition of Texas, which I think is fascinating to me. Because if somebody was asked, like, what are the major influences in your mind of Texas, Mexico, Germany, and maybe some Eastern European and Czech stuff, Vietnam, like, where else in the world would those be the top three answers of culinary influence due to this incredible immigration here, which is just like making our food so much better, and all translates to the regional ingredients so well. So German would be fun, but for now I'll just cook German food, here and there. Sometimes we'll just bust out a German menu for a special event, and that'll do it for me.
Sounds so good.
So have you guys put like tallow fried schnitzel on the menu or anything like that?
We have done little cutlets and schnitzels before. Sometimes you could add it to your biscuits and gravy.
So good.
But it's been a little while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. But we did a special dinner not too long ago where we did some schnitzel.
Mm.
And it's, as you'd imagine, it's quite good when fried in beef fat.
That sounds incredible. I hope that we get lucky enough to come to Dai Due one night where there's schnitzel on the menu.
Yeah.
And
Schnitzel is.
And you guys used to do fried chicken, and now it's fried quail, right? In tallow?
Right. I mean, not to get too far into the weeds, but we had a farmer, a chicken farmer that we used for, I think, like 16 years. And then they closed shop, health issues, stuff. And it was heartbreaking because it was so dialed for us. Like they grew exactly what we wanted and exactly the way that we wanted. Wonderful people, very consistent. We were getting our 82 chickens a week in this perfect size for frying. And then when that went away, it was really hard for us to find, kind of almost regressing back to those early days where it was kind of hard to find not just chicken, but of a certain size and a certain volume every week to do this. And so we just made the decision to go with quail from my friend Todd out in Lockhart. He's one of the biggest quail producers in the state. And we just went with that. It was a shift. It was hard in the beginning, but it was informed by we couldn't get exactly what we wanted in the right numbers of the right quality to the right standards of this other thing. So that's what we went with.
Got it. I feel like I'm asking a very, very selfish question. So I'm sorry. I was just curious about it because I just remember the shift happening and being like, well, I don't think I remember consciously being like, I don't know if I've ever really had quail before, but if they're serving it and it's cooked in tallow, it's probably delicious. And just being amazed by the dish and loving it. So I appreciate you sharing that story.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, transparency is important. Like we could source chickens, but they're going to come from California,
Right.
and that's not our neighbors. More power to them. I hope that your California neighbors, but it's not. We're gonna support Todd.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the new restaurant or grocery store concept called Radius?
I certainly have.
You excited about that?
I am. I know Joe really well.
Nice.
And Kevin. Definitely. We've had a lot of conversations about that. I'm excited for them to come on board. I think they're going to do really well.
Yeah.
Sad to see Salt and Thyme go. We came up together, known them forever. I've actually met Ben out in California when we were out there for a convention many years ago before he had moved here to open up. And so way back, they did it really well. Very high quality, really talented people. And so, but he's going to do something great. So.
Yeah. We're excited to see that come to the east side. It'll just be another evolution of this whole food scene here on the east side of Austin.
Yeah.
Which has been incredible.
Well, brother, we appreciate you so much for doing this, man. As Harry had mentioned before we recorded, we've wanted to do this for over a year, and your restaurant has been home to a lot of really special memories for us. And we just appreciate just the integrity, the story, you being willing to share that with us. It means so much, man, and we just appreciate you.
Thank you. It was great. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and have a conversation. It was a good time. I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Sweet. Let's do it soon.
Cool.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks,
Thank
Jesse.
you.